Welcome to another exciting new episode of Talking About Stoicism, where we're going over the meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Can I do it any faster? Maybe. Who knows? Who knows? We'll see next time. Now, today what I would like to do is talk to you about a section in Book 9. One section that drew my attention again, but that I don't want to talk about today, is section 13. Today I escaped from all bothering circumstances, or rather I threw them out. They were nothing external, but inside me, just my own judgments. I think that is a good one to bear in mind as a nice reminder of it's not the thing itself that bothers us, but it's how we think about that thing. But the issue with that is that we have talked about that a lot of times in this series, so I feel that if I were to go over that again, it feels a lot like rehashing what we have already done. So then I thought of section 16, which I'm not sure if I understand it fully, which more than once is the case with Marcus Aurelius, because he can be a bit cryptic, but I do really like it. So I'll give you my interpretation of this, and then we'll see. Section 16. Good or ill for the rational social being lies not in feeling, but in action, just as also his own virtue or vice shows not in what he feels, but in what he does. Now, this made me think about is, I'm going to try and sit very still here, because if I move too much, the camera, I think, tries to adjust for the light, so I'm trying not to move too much. In my mind, what Marcus Aurelius is saying here is something that I find very interesting. And that is the distinction between thinking and doing, or saying and doing. I find that a lot of times people say all kinds of things, claim all kinds of things, but when it comes to actually doing those things, they don't really put it into practice. In other words, practice what you preach. And this reminded me, it was sort of a cross-reference of another famous quote by Marcus Aurelius: stop talking about what it means to be a good man or person. Be one. And I think that we should not lose track of that specific concept. Words are very cheap, but it's doing things, actually doing things, that shows what kind of person you are. And that's not always easy. I had to think about that when today I had a meeting with a Dutch, well, I can't really say student. He has a master's degree. He was not working on a PhD, but he is working on becoming a clinical psychologist. And I have co-supervised his project with someone in the Netherlands. It was a project that dealt with heart rate variability, which happens to be a topic I studied in my postdoctoral work. So he had reached out to me a few years ago that he was looking for a supervisor who could supervise that aspect of the project. So I was the sort of the technical expert, and then there was another supervisor who was there for the entire process of general setting up research and that kind of stuff. And this again, is not a student because he's a psychologist already, but registering to become a fully licensed clinical psychologist. So we had our final conversation today. Now, I still have not lost my train of thought, which is a miracle because I am getting older. But the point I was trying to make was his other supervisor and this person and me had a discussion about scientific integrity. Because the research that I can't say the three of us, that the person had done didn't actually find much support for the hypothesis that he was testing, which is often the case in scientific research, right? You kind of tend to hear the success stories of science, but there's a lot of research where you do an experiment and you don't find what you thought you were going to find. And this was one of those studies. And what we discussed was, it's very easy. You have to put yourself in the mind of a researcher here. It's very easy to tweak a couple numbers. You have this big spreadsheet of data in front of you. And if a couple numbers get tweaked a little bit, then all of a sudden your data may be statistically significant, which is something that we like. That means that they are, I'm simplifying, but they are not likely to be due to chance, but that it's a real effect that you have found. And we complimented our mutual supervisee that he had not done that. But not only that, he had been very frank in the discussion section of his paper in explaining that what he thought he would find, he simply didn't find. And that was the end of it. No mitigating factors, no arguments of, well, maybe if next time we would have tested more participants. None of that. Now, what I'm trying to say is, it is one thing to say, oh, well, as a scientist, I have much integrity, or as a person, but I'm using this specific example to hopefully make a point. It's easy to say that, oh, I have integrity, I deal with integrity, I treat my data with integrity. But it's another thing when you sit there and you stare at the numbers and you're so close and you can just change a few. It's unlikely that someone will find out if you only do it once. But once you go down that slope, you just slide down a path of vice. This may sound like a small thing, but it's not, because it's scientific research and something our society thrives on. It's research that decisions are made or are based upon by governing bodies. Or organs, I should say in English. I think bodies? No, bodies in English. That's Dutch. Anyway, so that matters. It matters what you do. And I'm always reminded of the Stoic principle in that regard of there is virtue and there is vice. And the only thing in between those two things is what we have discussed many times before, the indifference that you can use for good or for evil, depending on how you do it. Like, say, money. Money is inherently neither good nor evil. It's just a thing, and you can use it for good, you can use it for evil. But that's those two extremes, virtue and vice. And again, I have to often think of this, the Stoic metaphor of, and I forget which Stoic it's from, but if you are an inch below the surface of the sea, you will drown just as much as if you are a mile below the surface of the sea. So in other words, if you do a little bit, there's no such thing really as a little bit of vice. It's all equally bad. A small viceful action is as bad as a very serious viceful action. And again, saying that is easy, but doing it's a different matter. Standing up for what you believe in, actually practicing what you preach, actually doing what you believe in, and what you say you do, or that you promise, or that kind of stuff. That's much harder. And I think it's very important for us to remember that. And that's why I like this specific section so much. Good or ill for the rational social being lies not in feeling but in action, just as also his own virtue or vice shows not in what he feels but in what he does. Is it possible for you to feel virtue but commit an act of vice, or the other way around, to feel vice but commit an act of virtue? Hopefully the latter is more common, that we feel, well, I could do this, I could get away with this, but then we end up not doing it. Maybe that's our conscience. Much to think about. I find this an interesting topic. I don't know if you do too. I do. I hope you do. I hope this has been some food for thought. And I would love to hear your opinion as always, so please leave your comments if you have another interpretation of Marcus Aurelius. I'm always willing to listen, because some of his writing is very terse, and I find it often complicated to try and figure out what he means. Sometimes he's very clear, sometimes he's incomprehensible, and oftentimes he's somewhere in between. So anyway, let me know. I hope this was useful, and I'll gladly see you later. Bye-bye. Nothing happened. Bye-bye. Deja vu. Bye-bye. Okay, at this point I'm getting a little afraid. Bye-bye.